So today's class, History of English Literature, we are going to look at Shakespeare in detail. So the class is titled The Bard of Avon. So before we go to Shakespeare proper, let's acquaint ourselves with the Elizabethan theatre first. So let's start with this section, Elizabethan theatre. During the Elizabethan theatre, drama, achieved its peak. But before that, there were a lot of forms. And we looked at some of them yesterday. So when we say Elizabethan age, it starts from 1558 to 1603, the reign of Queen Elizabeth, also called Virgin Queen. And she was born in 1533 and belonging to House of Tudor. And these are the types of plays that were before, the proper plays. So we have mystery plays. When we say mystery, the plays were conducted or sponsored by trade guilds, trade unions. And most of the plays were based on what is there in the Bible. So Bible-based plays, mystery plays. Then comes miracle plays. Miracle based on the lives of saints. For instance, we have a modern miracle play, T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral. So which focuses on St. Thomas Becket. So that could be considered as a miracle play. Then comes morality play, where it's an allegorical play based on good and bad or good and evil. Example could be Dr. Faustus. Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus is a morality play, and one of the famous morality plays is Everyman. Then interlude. Interlude, there are two definitions for interlude. When we say interlude, it is a short play or the shortest play that comes between two acts or between acts in a major play. If you have a 5-act play, it is somewhere comes in the 3rd or 4th act between the intervals. Or it is a short play that, actors put on when they are invited to perform in a royal household, especially where there is a feast. So that is another definition for interlude. Anyone remembers the name of the person who is known for the famous interlude? The 4 P's representing Palmer is John Haywood. So when we think of John Haywood, we immediately think of interlude. So let me elaborate on this particular one, because sometimes we get questions from mystery plays. So mystery, as I told you, the word mystery has nothing to do with the mystery here. It refers to trade guilds, trade unions. Even these days, they sponsor, during the summer when there is a temple festival, they sponsor. So similar way, we have 4 surviving plays regarding mystery plays. One is called Wakefield plays. Plays that were performed in a place called Wakefield in the northern England. It's also called Townsley plays, Towneley, Townley plays. So it was performed during the 15th century, and it consists of 32 mystery plays, also called pageants. Sometimes they are more in the episodic form. Okay. And most of the plays are based on something called Corpus Christi or during that festival. And these are the 4 surviving mystery plays. In one of the set exams, there was a question from this section. The question was this: of the 4 mystery plays, which has the most number of plays? So that was the question. Answer is York. So, these are the name of the places where the plays were put on. And we have some of the surviving manuscripts, and most of them are fragmentary, or we call it episodes. So York mystery plays, we have 48 episodes. Then we have Coventry, or in full name, Ludus, Ludus, Ludus Coventry mystery plays, we have 42 episodes. Then the famous one, Wakefield or Townley mystery plays, we have 32 episodes. And the last one, Chester mystery plays, we have 25 episodes. And what happened after these one? So we have someone called, or people called, strolling players, strolling. You know the word stroll. If you say I'm going for a stroll, you go for a walk, in the air. So these strolling players, they move from one place to another, kind of a wandering players. Where they perform in inns or taverns where people come to eat and drink. So in most of the inns, we have yard, a big yard. For example, we have a famous inn, Cross Keys, Keys, Cross Keys Inn. So this inn is very famous in London, but till 1596, because after that there was a law that plays should not be performed inside London because it created a lot of problems there. That's why theaters were banned in 1642 by the Puritans. Because on the way to the theater, there were brothels, there were wine shops, and the prostitutes, they went to theaters to woo the customers. So the Puritans looked at theater as a place of evil. So that's where most of the playhouses were shut down when the Puritans came to power during the Commonwealth period, 1649. But let's look at these guys because they are the transition ones. It's a transition period. So earlier plays were based on the Bible, the saints. Most of them are morality, or most of them are religious themes, or they're trying to teach you a moral. But these plays go beyond those themes. They talk about a lot of things because there are no restrictions. So, and they were actually performing in the inn yards of famous inns. So naturally, they have to please a lot of people. And there is a concept called bottling. Even now we have bottling, the concept of bottling by street artists. What is bottling? Especially for these plays, you need not buy a ticket. They don't sell you tickets. You come to the inn or tavern, there is a play, and you see the play. If you wish, you can give you some money, or else you need not give them any money. But they come and ask us using a bottle. So it's like kind of a begging, but they ask for money. So just after the performance, even now, we have someone coming around with a bottle or any container where we drop some money. So that's called bottling. And there was a law in 1598 which said, any playing house, a group of players, if they wanted to perform in London or outside London, what you have to do, you have to be patronized by a royal household or a royal person. If you are not patronized by a royal household or a person, you are considered rogue, porky, or vagabond, one who is wandering around, or sturdy beggars. So these playing houses or strolling players, they needed a patron. So that's how we get patronship for players. So we have, for the first time, we have something called theater companies or theatrical companies. So we have our acting companies. So we have Leicester's Men, considered one of the earliest acting companies. Leicesters. Earlier they were simply called Dudley's Men, because this group of players, they were supported by or patronized by this royal person called Robert Dudley, Dudley. Then he got this title called Earl of Leicester. So they were called Leicester's Men. And why this acting company is so important? Because, of course, Robert Dudley, if you knew, Robert Dudley was very intimate with Queen Elizabeth I. There are rumors, and the rumors say that they had some romantic relationship, Robert Dudley and the Virgin Queen. And then he later fell out of favor by Elizabeth I. But interesting fact about this acting company is that this acting company visited Stratford, the birthplace of Shakespeare. 1586, something happened. One of their players, William Knill, he died in Stratford. So they were short of a player to perform in a play. So there is a theory that says Shakespeare might be interested in performing that role, and Leicester's Men might have asked Shakespeare to join, and Shakespeare might have performed with them, and with them he might have reached London, because we don't know how Shakespeare, one who was born in a remote place called Stratford upon Avon, came to London. So this is a theory that when this acting company went there, one of their players died, and Shakespeare might have chipped in and came to London. It's a possible theory and believable one. Then these are some of the other famous acting companies. And after the Leicester's Men, Queen Elizabeth I realized that she should create her own group of players. So she created Queen's Men in 1583. Then comes Admiral Men. Why Admiral Men is important? Because they were the ones who performed Christopher Marlowe's tragedies. So you have Dido or Dr. Faustus or Tamburlaine, Jew of Malta, all were performed by Admiral Men. Also, Admiral Men is associated with Ben Jonson. Then we have some of the famous acting companies at that time. We have Strang, the pronunciation is Strang, S-T-R-A-N-G-E, Strang's Men, Oxford Men. They are named after their patrons, Earl of Strang, Earl of Oxford, Earl of Worcester. So W-O-R-C-E-S-T-R, Worcester's Men. Then Pembroke's Men. Why Pembroke's Men? We remember this acting company. They became notorious, famous for bad reasons because of this play called The Isle of Dogs. Isle of Dogs, one of the lost plays of Ben Jonson, and it was written by Ben Jonson and Thomas Nash. And it is a controversial play, and it includes a lot of words and other things criticizing the government. So it was banned, and because of that, Ben Jonson was arrested and put behind the bars with fellow players. Then we have another acting company called Sussex Men. Then we have Lord Chamberlain's Men. Lord Chamberlain's Men, one of the favorite acting companies for Queen Elizabeth I. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, James I came to throne, Jacobean age. So this company is renamed or was renamed the King's Men. And we have Shakespeare writing for this Lord Chamberlain's Men for years. Of course, he worked for a lot of other companies, but this is the company with which we associate Shakespeare. And after the acting companies, definitely you need a place to put on plays, right? So what happened? Playhouses. They started building playhouses for the first time in London. Of course, Queen Elizabeth liked plays, so the laws were repealed. So new laws allowing theaters to be built in London. Generally, playhouses were built, around London, not within the city limit. So for the first time, we have a playhouse called the Theatre. That is the name of the playhouse itself, built by James Burbage in 1576. And this playhouse, the Theatre, is considered the first playhouse in London. And James Burbage is very relevant because kind of an entrepreneur who built this theatre. And interesting story, then this theatre should be modernized. So the theatre was owned by James Burbage. James Burbage had actually two elder sons, Cuthbert, C-U-T-H-B-E-R-T, Cuthbert Burbage and Richard Burbage. So elder sons, they owned a lot of shares. And what they did, they bought some land for lease. And with them, some of the members of Lord Chamberlain's Men, including Shakespeare and Will Kemp and others, they became shareholders of the new theatre called the Globe Theatre. When Globe Theatre was built, it was built on a land leased by Cuthbert Burbage and Richard Burbage, and money supplied by Shakespeare, Will Kemp, and other members of Lord Chamberlain's Men. So that's why this theatre is very important, Globe Theatre, because players or playwrights, they themselves sponsor. An important thing about this theatre, one of the owners, Richard Burbage, he is considered one of the most famous Shakespearean actor ever, Richard Burbage, because he played, look at the roles he played: Hamlet, Othello, Lear, Macbeth, Richard III, Henry IV, Romeo. He's a tragedian known for playing the tragic roles. So Richard Burbage, you should remember, and he's also one of the owners of the Globe Theatre. An interesting thing about Globe Theatre, of course, it was built in 1599, and it was built with the materials plucked from the theatre. So we have the planks and other materials which are not rotten. So when the theatre, I mean the first playhouse was dismantled, the players and they carried some of the materials from theatre, and with that material and other new material they built the Globe Theatre. And look at the theatre, how the theatres are like. It's almost cylindrical if you look at it, cylindrical in shape. So let's look at the features of other theatres and theatres in general. And these are some of the other playhouses. So we have Henry Lanman, L-A-N-M-A-N. He built the Curtain Theatre in 1577, which is considered the second playhouse in London. And comes this entrepreneur, Philip Henslow, very important entrepreneur, because something got into him, so he started building a lot of theatres. Some of the famous theatres we have the Rose, he himself built it, 1587. Then we have Fortune Theatre, Henslow and William Allen in 1600. Then comes Hope Theatre, Henslow and Jacob Mead, they sponsored 1613 and 14. So sometimes you will simply get a question, which of the following is not one of the theatres or playhouses in during the Elizabethan age? So just look at the names: the Curtain Theatre, the Theatre, Globe Theatre, the Rose, Fortune Theatre, Hope Theatre. And among this, we have one of the most famous theatres, the Swan Theatre. Why this theatre is famous? We do not have any document or any evidence how an Elizabethan theatre looked like. So this theatre, the Swan Theatre, was built by Francis Langley, L-A-N-G-L-E-Y, in 1595. Fortunately, at that time, there was a Danish visitor to London called Johannes de Witt, W-I-T-T, around 1596. So he came to London, he visited a lot of playhouses, and is also known for his ability to draw. So what he did, he drew the sketch of the swan. So that's what you are looking at the screen. So this is how theatres looked like during the Elizabethan time. Johannes de Witt, so he had this sketch, and the sketch was later published by his friend. So this is the only piece of evidence or the sketch we have about Elizabethan theatre. So that's why this sketch is very important. So look at the theatre. So it's cylindrical in shape, and we have 3 tiers. I mean galleries. So galleries are costly. If you want to sit there and watch the play, you have to pay more. Or else you can come to this arena, I mean pit, in front of the stage. It's like groundlings, tara ticket. Very not bit cheap. You can watch very closely. And this is the open theatre stage. And the stage, sometimes they have trap doors, so that if they go for ghost, or if they use ghost, that ghost can come from below. And look at the stage also have some kind of a canopy there. Then on the top, there's a house, and from there, there's a person who is actually raising the flag, and he also has something there, right? And behind the stage, if you look at it, there's a balcony, and there are no screens, there are no curtains. If you look at it, very open. So let's look at some of the features of Elizabethan theatre. As I told you before, it's cylindrical in shape, 3 stories, right? And you have galleries, and this is the groundling, tara ticket. Even now, if you go to some theatres, you have the front rows. You can sit there and watch for ₹10 or 20, because no one occupies that position. Then the canopies here on the stage, it's also called the heavens or shadow. Then behind there you have balcony, definitely used for Romeo and Juliet. There's some trapdoors, and there's something called tiring house or tire house. Tiring or tiring house, remember the word attire, A-T-T-I-R-E. What is the meaning of the word attire in English? A-T-T-I-R-E. So when we say attire, it's a very formal word in English, which means clothes or dress. So this is the place where we go for change of clothes, right? So this is tiring house or tire house. And there was a technique I read somewhere here there. Sometimes the characters, they go for long speeches. Imagine Hamlet giving a lengthy soliloquy. Why they went for long speeches? So that other players could go behind to the tiring house and change clothes. They get time. These long speeches buy them some time to change clothes. Then, of course, you know the meaning of box office, where you buy tickets and the money they collected or kept in the box office. Then we have something called the green room. Of course, it's clothed in green, where visitors are welcomed and where they can take some rest. The players can take some rest. Then, what about the capacity of a normal theater? Around 2,000 to 3,000 visitors or spectators can sit in a theater. And not just a theater, there are other forms of entertainment. So we have bear baiting, one of the entertainments, and cockfighting. We are aware of cockfighting. What is bear baiting? Bear baiting, it's a cruel sport where a bear is tied to a post in the center of the playhouse or the inn, right near the stage, especially where the groundlings are there. And they set dogs on the bear. So it's a fight between a single bear and hunting dogs. And of course, you know what's going to happen. The bear would be killed by the hunting dogs. And people bet on this one, and they like this bloody entertainment. So that is bear baiting. When theaters, there were no plays in a good place, of course, they also go for this kind of entertainment so they can woo the audience and get some money. That's how playhouses survived. Then let's look at some of the other features of Elizabethan theater. So we have something called a penthouse here at the top of the building, from where the flags are hoisted. The flags have the symbols of the theater, like swan or other one. And from where trumpets were blown to announce, okay, there is a play going on, you can come and watch. So we get the announcement through flags and trumpets. And the rule is that you have to perform a play during the daylight, during the day. Of course, it's outdoors and open, and you should start the play around 2 o'clock and finish it around 5. So it should be around 2 to 3 hours, the duration of the play. And even now, like posters, they had playbills. So like of a handouts. If it's a tragedy, the playbills, most of them, it's in red in color. And as I told you before, there are no curtains before the stage. It's very open. And to indicate the scene, maybe if the scene is shifting from one scene to another, maybe Rome, if you want to show Rome, there is a placard which says Rome, that's all. And if you are shifting from Rome to London, the placard says London, so that the audience know the scene is shifting from one place to another. And as a rule, as you know, women were not allowed to play, to perform, to act on the stage. So their roles were performed by young boys. So there were companies, theater companies exclusively ran by the boys, young boys. And this changed in 1660. You know the significance of 1660, when Commonwealth period came to an end, Puritan age came to an end, and monarchy was restored. Which monarch came to power? Anyone? Because in 1642, theaters were closed. 1649, Charles I was beheaded. So his son, Charles II, he came back to England and he became the monarch. So 1660 is significant because in regards to theater, because Charles II allowed, the king himself allowed women to play, because Charles II was there during his exile in France. So the French thoughts influenced him, and when he came back to London, England, when he became the monarch, he said, why not? So this entire thing changed after 1660. Then let's go to the hero of today's class, the bard, Shakespeare. William Shakespeare. Sometimes you will get tricky question from his birth itself. So he was born on 23 April 1564, St. George's Day. But we do not have any evidence that he was born on that particular day, 23rd April 1564. But we have a document, his baptism certificate, which says Shakespeare was baptized on 26th April 1564. So with this certificate, we arrive at a conclusion that Shakespeare might have been born on 23rd April 1564. Why do we come to this conclusion? Because there was a tradition. A Christian child was baptized 3 days after its birth. All right. So because of this tradition, we come to the conclusion, okay, 26th April 1564, then Shakespeare might have been born on 23rd April. So this is a guess or based on evidence, that's all. But we do not have any evidence saying that Shakespeare was born on 23rd April 1564. And his death, similar to birth, 23rd April 1616. An interesting thing about William Shakespeare, when during his lifetime, these are some of the spellings used by Shakespeare. Look at the spelling for Shakespeare, Shakespeare. After KE is missing, then he used a lot of short forms to sign. So SHAKESPE or SHAKSPERE and SHAKSPERE. There are a lot of spellings, or William WILLAM or WILLM, WM. There are a lot of spellings. Interesting thing is that the spelling we have now, William Shakespeare, SHAKESPERE. This was the one spelling not used by Shakespeare during his lifetime. But ironically, this is the spelling we use now. So that's the interesting thing about William Shakespeare, the spelling. And there is a theory that the name William Shakespeare might come from the French name Jacques Pierre, JACQUES, Pierre, PIERRE, which is a very common French name. And the theory is that this name turned into or became Shakespeare. Jack Pierre becomes Shakespeare. And this theory was supported by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud didn't come up with this theory, but he supported this theory that the French name became Shakespeare. So we don't know how much it is true, but there is some sound to it, right? Jack Pierre, Shakespeare is there. Then, of course, we have this sobriquet, the Swan of Avon. So, as he was born at this place, Stratford upon Avon, Warwickshire, England. And Ben Jonson called him Sweet Swan of Avon, and he wrote an elegy in the first folio for his master, where he said, "What a sight it were to see thee in our waters it appear, and make those flights upon the banks of Thames, that so did take Eliza and our James." So Ben Jonson says, look at Shakespeare, who comes as a bird, a singing bird from Avon. From that waters of Avon, you have come to the waters of Thames, because Thames, when we think of Thames, we think of Queen Elizabeth and James I. Now we think of you, the sweet swan of Avon. Then Shakespeare's father's name, John Shakespeare. So his profession, Glover, GLOVER, and Whittawer, WHITTAWER. One who did his business in leathers, clothes, and other things. Very professional trade. Then his mother, Mary Arden, ARDAN. When I think of Mary Arden, I think of this scholarly edition of Shakespeare's individual plays, The Arden Shakespeare. You might have bought for your BA and MAs any of the plays prescribed. The Arden Shakespeare is considered a scholarly edition because these editions comes with scholarly introductions, refined spellings, with notes, annotations, and towards the end you have index and everything beautiful. So it's relied upon text, and generally they go for individual text. So King John, Hamlet, each and every play comes up with scholarly ones. So actually speaking, this was actually a net question. It was a question asked in a net exam because they gave a lot of editions. They asked which edition is considered a scholarly edition of Shakespeare's individual plays. Why I'm stressing on individual plays? Because there are editions, they go for full length. I mean, the whole collection is entire works, but this edition goes for individual plays. Then there is this another story, a weird story, but it's still relevant because one of my colleagues asked me that, "Sir, was Shakespeare a butcher?" I have never come across that. Then I said, I will verify and let you know. Then somehow I landed on this book called John Aubrey's Brief Lives. So it's a short, it consists of short biographies, brief lives. I got this book and went through this book on biography on Shakespeare. Jean Aubrey, I think he had some imaginative mind. So he came up with a lot of theories, a lot of interesting stories. That's why Brief Lives is interesting. So this is his theory that Shakespeare's father was a butcher in Stratford upon Avon. And his son, William Shakespeare, should have followed the same profession. So Shakespeare was a butcher. And this is the story. When Shakespeare performed or exercised his father's trade, in the sense when he killed a calf, beef for meat, and he was very moved by the death of a calf. So what he did, whenever he killed a calf for meat, and he couldn't tolerate the pain of that calf. So what he did, he sang a song, a kind of a dirge. So that's how he was more interested in tragedy. A far-fetched theory, but still it's followed because the question, it's not my colleague, that colleague belonged to a different department. Because when a different department, a teacher asked us whether Shakespeare was a butcher, it was an insult to us. We should know all these things. Somehow now we have the source. So when it comes to literature, if you come across a theory, try to find the source. In the same source, we also found that we can also find that same John Aubrey comes up with another theory for Ben Jonson. Oh, rare Ben Jonson. So that is written on his epitaph. So he tells a story for that. There was a person who walked by the cemetery of Ben Jonson. So there was nothing written on Ben Jonson's tomb. So that person sponsored a sculptor to write "Oh, rare Ben Jonson." We don't know. It's a story given by Jean Aubrey. So if you are interested in learning about a lot of these interesting stories, you can get Brief Lives. Then we know about his schooling. We are told that Shakespeare knew small Latin and less Greek. Who said that? Shakespeare knew small Latin and less Greek. But, you know, Shakespeare attended King's New School at in Church Street. Yes, of course, Ben Jonson said this, small Latin, Shakespeare knew small Latin and less Greek. We will come back to this later, but I read Bill Bryson. You might know Bill Bryson, who is known for writing a lot of books, interesting books in simple English. So he also wrote a biography. So I read Bill Bryson's biography, in which Bill Bryson says Shakespeare knew enough Latin and Greek, because you should know schools like this, grammar schools like King's New School. It's a grammar school. If you attend grammar school in the 16th and 15th and 16th century, you can't come out without mastering classical languages like Latin and Greek. And a schoolboy, especially who attends a grammar school, cannot survive the entire period without learning Latin and Greek. Definitely Shakespeare knew enough grammar, Latin and Greek grammar. So that is the assertion by Bill Bryson. Then after schooling, of course, the young Shakespeare, aged 18, a teenage boy, got married to Anne Hathaway. So when he got married to Anne Hathaway, he was just 18 and Anne Hathaway was 26. So there's a 8 years gap. And Anne Hathaway was born in 1556 and died in 1623. She outlived Shakespeare 7 years. Shakespeare died in 1616 and she died in 1623. And her original name is Agnes, Agnes. G is silent, Agnes. And this is the marriage certificate. I mean, in the marriage certificate, this is the name we have, spelling we have for Shakespeare. Shagspere. Shakespeare. So this is the spelling we find in his marriage certificate. And there is an interesting thing about his will. When Shakespeare died, he wrote a will. In that will, he left his second best bed to his wife Anne Hathaway. And sometimes people consider it is an insult to Anne Hathaway, because when we say second best bed, these best beds are reserved for guests. If guests come to your home, they are asked to sleep in the second best beds. So why Shakespeare left his second best bed to his wife? So that's a question. But there are other theories that there should be something romantic or intimacy attached with this bed. So Shakespeare left as a token of love to Anne Hathaway. Anyway, details say that after the death of Shakespeare, Anne Hathaway inherited his most of his properties. So Anne Hathaway was actually rich. And there's also another feminist theory which says that Anne Hathaway might have sponsored the publication of the first folio. So that is also there, published in 1623. And we come to sonnet 145. Why this sonnet is a favorite? Because we have a wordplay. We know Shakespeare is known for his wordplay, pun. So look at this. I hate from Hathaway she threw and saved my life, saying not you. So we know a desperate young man, William Shakespeare or Shakespeare, so who might have wooed this elderly woman. And it's not, there are also other theories. This elderly woman might have seduced Shakespeare. That is one theory. There is another theory. No, this young man went after this elderly girl for years, and finally she accepted to marry him. So initially she might have said, I hate, but she said, I hate not you, I love you. So he felt happy. So there's a word play. Hate away, Hathaway, Anne Hathaway. So it could be personal. It could be personal, or Shakespeare's own love story getting into sonnet 145. And we have a famous feminist writer, Germaine Greer, Greer, known for her biography. I mean, she wrote this biography, Shakespeare's Wife, about Anne Hathaway. Because there are a lot of biographies on Shakespeare, not on Shakespeare's wife. So with the document available and with her imagination, she came up with this biography. Then let's look at their children issue, an Old English word for children. So they had 3 children, Anne Hathaway and Shakespeare. So we have Susanna, the first child, born in May 1583. Then we have the twins, Judith and Hamnet, Hamnet, in 1585. Look at the year 1585, which is very significant. But unfortunately, this young boy, Hamnet, died at the age of 11 in 1596. Maybe we don't know the exact reason. Plague could be one of the reasons. And people believed the death of this child, Hamlet, might have influenced Shakespeare to write Hamlet at the later point of time. And this theory is supported by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, in his interpretation of dreams, wrote this sentence. Of course, I have abridged it. Hamlet is identical with Hamlet. So kind of a reverse psychology. So in the sense, this is all about the death of a son, the mourning of a father. Hamlet's death and Shakespeare's mourning. And in the play Hamlet, where the father dies and the son mourns. So that is that. Maybe Sigmund Freud says it's more of a repression. Shakespeare repressed that trauma, and the play is an outlet of that repression. And there is a novel written by Maggie O'Farrell, Farrell, And name of the novel, Hamnet, Hamnet, a novel of the plague. This tells, it's a reimagination of the death of Hamnet and the life of Anne Hathaway in Stratford upon Avon when Shakespeare was in London. Then comes Lost Years of Shakespeare, LOST. This is the period, as I told you before, 1585, the birth of the twins, Judith and Hamlet, and 1592. Between these years, we do not know what or where was Shakespeare or what happened to him, what was he doing, we don't know. We do not have any documentary evidence regarding this period of Shakespeare's life. But we have one document saying that 1585, Shakespeare was in Stratford upon Avon because the twins were baptized. 1592, yes, 1592, anyone? We have an important document, one who was very jealous of Shakespeare's success, a university wit who came up with a pamphlet writing about Shakespeare. So that document was there, right? So in order to fill this gap, there are a lot of theories. What was Shakespeare doing? One of the theories, as I told you before, during this time, 1586, the theatre company, Leicester's Men, they visited Stratford upon Avon. One of their players died. Shakespeare went with him and reached London. That is one theory. Another theory given by the famous editor of Shakespeare's work, Nicholas Rowe. He came up with the modern edition of Shakespeare's works. So for that edition, he wrote a preface. So he also wrote a brief biography of Shakespeare. In that biography, Nicholas Rowe says, Shakespeare, a poor teenager, now a family man with 3 children and a wife, he might have killed a deer in the estate of Sir Thomas Lucy, Charlecot, and he was caught red-handed, so he should be punished. So in order to escape punishment, he ran away from Stratford and somehow he reached London. This is another theory. This is a fantastic theory, interesting coming up with. So Shakespeare is a deer poacher, stealing deers and selling. That's how he got his money to run the family. And there's also another theory, kind of a feminist theory, which says the elderly woman, so his wife, Anne Hathaway, should be a practical woman. She might have given him a slap. Hey, idiot, you got married. You are no longer a teenager. Now you have 3 children. Why don't you earn? Go to London and earn some money and send some money home. So maybe his wife scolded him. So Shakespeare came to London to earn. So that could be another theory. Now, Shakespeare came to London, we knew, because Robert Greene wrote his pamphlet, Groat's Worth of Wit, G-R-O-A-T. Groat is a coin of useless value or of little value, 1592. So this is the document. So in which he calls Shakespeare an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers. So Shakespeare is accused of plagiarism. So Shakespeare came to London, he imitated the university wits and their plays and stole a lot of stories from them, play within the play and other things. And Shakespeare is called an absolute genus factotum and the only Shakespeare scene in a country. So look at Robert Greene, he is very jealous, envious, because a person from a countryside, a country bum, a kata, coming to London and getting money and fame and everything in a short period of time. And why is called an absolute genre of factotum? When you say genre, J-O-H-A-N-N-E-S, factotum, F-A-C-T-O-T-U-M, factotum, one who is good at a lot of trades, a jack of all trades. Because look at Shakespeare, a playwright, a poet, and he is a shareholder in Globe Theatre and he's also an actor. So we have some evidence. Shakespeare played small roles in his own plays. For instance, in Hamlet, Shakespeare might have played the ghost of King Hamlet. It's a very short role, but Shakespeare might have played that role. That is there. And Shakespeare also played roles, small roles in his friend's play. Ben Jonson's Every Man in His Humor. I think Know All. That's the character Shakespeare played. And in Ben Jonson's Roman play, Sejanus His Fall. So Shakespeare might have played in Every Man in His Humor and Sejanus His Fall. Of course, Shakespeare belonged to this company called Lord Chamberlain's Men. And this Lord Chamberlain's Men, they performed before Queen Elizabeth I. Definitely Shakespeare knew Queen Elizabeth and kind of a favorite, Queen Elizabeth, a favorite playwright. And after her death, it became the King's Men. And the year is important, 1599, the theater, Globe Theater was built. It's called a theater built by actors for actors. As I told you before, the shareholders are players. So you have Shakespeare, Will Kemp, and other shareholders, and also Richard Burbage. And a theater built by actors for actors because they can earn money. Because there was the rule at that time, you know, when you write a play, the play, once you sell that play to a playhouse, it belongs to the playhouse. That's all. You can't claim the play as yours. The play belongs to the playhouse. So you can't sell the same play to another playhouse. So what you have to do, you have to write as many plays as possible so that you can be rich. There's nothing called royalty at that time. So you have to write many plays. So Shakespeare might have written around 50 to 60 plays or 100 plays. We don't know. Or he might have collaborated with others so that he could earn money, right? And of course, when the fate of this playhouse, 29th June 1630, when the play was performed, All Is True, also called Henry VIII. So during the performance of this play, Henry VIII or All Is True in 1613, there was this theatrical property, prop. You have a cannon. So someone fired this cannon because there is a scene in Henry VIII to welcome the king. So the fire or a spark from that cannon, you know, somehow caught fire. I mean, this roof, the roof of this Globe Theatre caught fire because of this spark from the cannon, and the entire playhouse was gutted, was burnt to ashes. So that's how Globe Theatre came to an end. But the very next year, of course, they rebuilt the play. Even now, if you visit London, we have this Globe Theatre in its modern version. And Globe Theatre is called This Wooden O by Shakespeare. And you know why it is called O? Because it's in most of the playhouses are in cylindrical in shape and built with wooden planks. So in Henry V, Shakespeare makes this reference to Globe Theatre, This Wooden O, kind of a meta play. And if you want to know or want to get some acquaintance with the structure of the plays or the theater houses or playhouses, you can watch this movie called Shakespeare in Love. And one of the screenplay writers is Tom Stoppard. You might know Tom Stoppard, a modern British playwright. He also wrote a kind of an adaptation of Shakespeare's play. You might know Tom Stoppard. Anyone remembers Tom Stoppard? Any of his plays by Tom Stoppard? Stoppard. Yes, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. That based on Hamlet and Waiting for Godot. Yes, Jumpers. And there are a lot of other plays as Travesties. Good. These are some of the plays by Tom Stoppard. Then, before I move on to the next slide, during his last years, after his retirement, of course, Shakespeare went back to Stratford upon Avon. Here is a play by the modern playwright Edward Bond, and he came up with a play called Bingo. And this Bingo imagines the last years of Shakespeare, LAST. So during his old age, what Shakespeare might have done. So Shakespeare now is a landowner. As a landowner, he is different. As a playwright, he is different. So he had to control the masses. Here, he had to act like a wealthy man, and he didn't support the causes of peasants. So that's an accusation against Shakespeare. So anyway, next one. So after his death, he was buried in the chancel of Holy Trinity Church. And if you maybe someday we can visit there. So we have an epitaph here, kind of a board written by Shakespeare, the words of Shakespeare, which says, here we have the modern version: "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." So these are the words, could be written by Shakespeare, who says, please let me stay here. So do not rebury me somewhere else. Don't do that. So I should stay here. So if you try to move, you will be cursed. So that's the end of this section. Now let's look at Shakespeare as a poet first. Then let's look at him as a playwright next. The London Plague, 1592-93, this is significant because during that time, playhouses were shut down because they couldn't perform plays for the fear of a spread of the plague. So during that time, Shakespeare had a lot of time at his hand. So at that time, Shakespeare might have written poems. We have epics, or epyllion as we call. Anyone remembers the epyllion or small epic written by Christopher Marlowe? Because similar to Christopher Marlowe's short epics. So here we have two short epics, or epyllion, Epillyon, or check out the spelling, epyllion. So we have Venus and Adone and the Rape of Lucrece. So similar way, there's also epyllion by Christopher Marlowe. Maybe you can check it out and let me know. It's a Hero and Leander. That's by Christopher Marlowe. Then these are some of the poems. We have a narrative poem called A Lover's Complaint. Then we have an allegorical poem, kind of a symbolic, using birds, the phoenix and the turtle. Then this is attributed to Shakespeare, the Passionate Pilgrim. Passionate Pilgrim is a kind of an anthology, a collection of 20 poems. Remember this printer, William Jaggard. He printed this one in 1599. That's why, because of this printer, William Jaggard, why this printer is important. He was one of the major printers, one of the guys who helped printed the first folio in 1623. The same printer here. So, and we have some clues. Okay, Shakespeare might have contributed to this anthology, or all the 20 poems are by Shakespeare. We don't know, but we have a collection of poems. The Passionate Pilgrim. Then the sonnets, of course, 154 sonnets. And the first section, 1 to 126, addresses the fair youth who doesn't get married. So the speaker says, please get married. Your youth and beauty should be preserved in your offspring. Then there is a dark lady from sonnet 127 to 152. This dark lady could be Mary Fitton, F-I-T-T-1, but we do not have strong evidence. Then the last two sonnets, 153 and 154, Cupid, Manmadan is there. And there's also another character called the rival poet. The rival poet also praises the fair youth. So we have the speaker and the rival poet. They compete with each other to praise the fair youth. And there is also a triangle love story with the dark lady. Then regarding his plays, there are 3 irregular sonnets. See, generally when we say sonnets, 14 lines written in iambic pentameter. But these 3 sonnets of Shakespeare's, they deviate from the tradition. So we have sonnet 99, which has 15 lines, 1 line extra. Then sonnet 126, which has 12 lines, so 2 short of the regular one. And 12 lines in the sense 6 couplets. So 6 2s are 12 in iambic pentameter. Then sonnet 145, and now we can easily remember sonnet 145, where he makes a pun with the Hathaway and Hathaway. It has nothing to do with the number of lines, but the meter. Sonnet 145 is written in iambic tetrameter. instead of iambic pentameter. Pentameter, you have 10 syllables. Tetrameter, you have 8 syllables. In this order, we have unstressed, stressed, da-dum kind of a one. And when I think of this, I also think of Bernard Shaw's play, The Dark Lady of the Sonnets. That's his own take of the identity of the Dark Lady. Then let's come to the publication of Shakespeare's sonnet. It was published in 1609. You know, just sometimes when you prepare for exams, so you have to imagine yourself in the shoes of the question setter. So just imagine if I were the question setter or you were the question setter, definitely I would not go for the publication year for the first folio of Shakespeare's collection. And everyone knows 1623, but hardly do students know the publication year of Shakespeare's sonnets, 1609. So it was, this is the first edition of Shakespeare's sonnet published by Thomas Thorpe, Thorpe. Thomas Thorpe is a notorious printer known for his pirated versions of other playwrights and other works. And there is this mysterious dedication. The entire collection is dedicated to Mr. W.H. Now there are a lot of questions. Who is this Mr. W.H.? There are theories, a lot of theories. We have 3 final contestants. Number 1, it could be the fair youth talked about in the sonnets, or it could be Henry Risley. That is the pronunciation of this one. Wriothesley. It is pronounced Risley. TH is silent. Henry Risley, Earl of Southampton. Or it could be William Herbert, 3rd Earl of Pembroke. So because at that time, poets or playwrights, they dedicated their work so that they could get some patronship. So that's how they got patronship, dedicating their works to some prospective patrons. And there are a lot of theories. This Henry Risley, it could be HW, so it could be the inversion WH, or William Herbert, perfect WH. Or there is another theory. These are waste of time, because who dedicated? Because we knew, or we are not so sure, Shakespeare authorized the publication of his sonnets. Because Thomas Thorpe, a notorious, known for his pirated versions, he might have somehow sneaked the sonnets and he published, and this could be his dedication, Mr. W.H. And we don't know. This W.H. nothing to do with Shakespeare, but more to do with Thomas Thorpe. We don't know. And let's move on. So let's look at some of the important sonnets. Sonnet 30. Why I go for sonnet 30? We have this famous line, remembrance of things past. This line comes in this famous sonnet, which becomes a title for Marcel Proust, Proust. It's pronounced Marcel Proust, famous French novelist. Marcel Proust is known for his stream of consciousness technique, and his novels, collection of novels, are called Remembrance of Things Past. Anyone knows the number of novels in Remembrance of Things Past? There is also an alternative title for Remembrance of Things Past. Remembrance of Things Past. How many novels are there? 7? Are you sure? 6? Okay. Try to find out the number of novels in this what we say group of novels, right? Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust. Then sonnet 116, everybody's favorite. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds. So love is compared to a star, North Pole, a pole star. Then it guides the wandering ships, barks. And the final couplet is very interesting. If this be error, and upon me prove, I never rich, nor no man ever loved. So kind of a declaration is there. Then sonnet 130, it is an anti-Petrarchan sonnet. So when we say Petrarchan sonnet is known for its exaggeration, pricing the lady to the skies. But this sonnet is an anti-Petrarchan sonnet, which goes against the tradition of Petrarchan sonnets. It is not praising, but praising in a different way. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. See, it's underestimating, but I mean underplaying, but still praising the mistress. It says, okay, my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, but yet I love her. So that's why this sonnet 130 is so important. And we also have a novel called Nothing Like the Sun, a story of Shakespeare's love life by Anthony Burgess, a modern novelist known for his famous novel, A Clockwork Orange. Very important novel when it comes to 20th century novel. Clockwork Orange. Clockwork Orange, it's a kind of a dystopian society. We also have a hero, a notorious teenager. You might know the name of the teenager or find out the name of the teenager who comes in A Clockwork Orange. So next we are going to Shakespeare's plays, but before we go to Shakespeare's plays, we have to look at his the publication. It's good, Alex. Good. So Alex is the hero of A Clockwork Orange. So let's go to folios and quartos. As I told you before, what is folio? Folio comes from the Latin word folium, which means leaf, representing a page of a book, leaf. So when we say folio, it's a large book about 15 inches tall. And generally you have a printer's sheet, you just fold it once in half. So you have 2 leaves or 4 pages. The size is, it's a 15 inches tall. The paper quality is good, and it is considered prestigious and costly, expensive. And Shakespeare's folio is not the first folio. There are a lot of other folios, but the first folio, in the sense, nothing to do with Shakespeare. 1616, Ben Jonson, the first English poet to publish his works as a folio, the works of Benjamin Jonson. So that's why, with this experience, Ben Jonson also helped others to bring out Shakespeare's folio. So he already has experience, right? Benjamin Jonson publishing his folio. So he might, of course, he should have helped the publication of Shakespeare's folio in 1623. When in 1623, the first folio was published. As I told you before, it's very costly. And of course, it was published by the members, the fellow actors, John Heminges, Heminges, and Henry Condell. The fellow members or fellow actors in Lord Chamberlain's Men or King's Men. And the first folio, it was sold for £1, very costly at that time, £1 each folio. And let's get some clarity regarding the number of plays written by Shakespeare. Generally, this is the number we settle on, 37 plays by Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote 37 plays. So that is the agreed upon number. But when the first folio, 1623, when it came out, it had only 36 plays. Pericles was not included by John Heminges, Henry Condell. There could be a lot of reasons. Maybe they believed they didn't have the manuscript of Pericles. That could be one reason. Or they didn't believe it was written by Shakespeare because they knew most of the plays written by Shakespeare. We don't know. But Pericles was included later. And sometimes we say 38 plays written by Shakespeare. We include this play, The Two Noble King's Men, because it was written by someone else, Fletcher. Shakespeare could have collaborated with Fletcher in writing The Two Noble King's Men. Initially, it was not accepted by many scholars as Shakespeare's work. Then few scholars accepted. Shakespeare collaborated with Fletcher and wrote this work. If you include The Two Noble King's Men, so we have 38 plays. Or else we settle for 37 plays. And if the question is very specific, the number of plays in the first folio go for 36 plays, Pericles not included. And look at the title. Even this could be a question. So if you want question, you can ask question from anywhere. Mr. Shakespeare's comedies, histories, tragedies. So the 36 plays were categorized under three classes: comedies, histories, and tragedies. So these are the three genres at that time: comedies, histories, tragedies. Then Shakespeare's plays were classified under different categories. Now, let's also focus on the publishers and other details. So it was dedicated, the work was dedicated by John Hemminges and Henry Condell to William and Philip Herbert. We already know William Herbert, Mr. W.H. It could be Mr. W.H., right? We don't know. Earl of Pembroke, or his brother Philip Herbert, Earl of Montgomery. So there are 36 plays, or there were 36 plays. 18 plays were already published. It's not the first time you get all the plays published, because there were pirated versions, quarto editions earlier. But for the first time, 18 plays are published for the first time. And we also have a list of actors, principal major actors who acted in these plays. 26 men. Look at that. William Shakespeare as one of the actors. Then Richard Burbage, because they are the top actors. Then John Hemminges, one of the actors here. Augustine Phillips, then William Kemp, very important comedian. Then here comes Henry Condell, then a lot of other people here. And I forgot to tell you that John Hemminges actually was there in Shakespeare's will. When Shakespeare wrote his will, he left 26 pence and shilling and 8 pence to John Hemminges to buy a mourning ring to attend the funeral, his funeral. So we know the intimacy between John Hemminges and Shakespeare. Then let's focus on printing. It was printed, as I told you before, William Jagot. I hope you remember William Jagot, the printer of Shakespeare's earlier work, right? The collection, poetry collection. So William Jagot was the primary printer, and as I told you before, very costly edition, first folio edition. So this printer, along with John Hemminges and Henry Condell, they formed a syndicate. With that syndicate, with the help of Edward Blount, B-L-O-U-N-T, you can chip in your money. You can sponsor. So if the folio becomes a success, you will get a share. So it's a kind of a crowdsourcing, right? Fundraising. And William Jagot died before the completion of the publication. So his son Isaac Jagot came in, and Isaac Jagot and Edward Blount, they published the first folio in 1623. So this is on the title page, right? On the cover, London, Isaac Jagot and Edward Blount. But the question is, if at all they ask the question, the printers, there are three: William Jagot, Edward Blount, and Isaac Jagot. If you notice, as I might have told this before, look at that. Instead of J, we have capital I, I-A-G-G-A-R-D. Because during the Elizabethan time, they didn't have the capital letter J. The printers went for capital I. They knew where to read the capital I as J, right? So then later we have something called spelling reform. Then J came into being. Then 1623, the first folio had an engraving, the Drew Shout engraving. This is the picture with which we identify Shakespeare. It was drawn by Martin Droeshout, D-R-O-E-S-H-O-U-T. There is also another portrait by, we don't know the person who painted that, but it is called the Chandos portrait. Chandos is a family name. It's a royal family. And this portrait was there in their collection. And this is attributed to Richard Burbage. You know Richard Burbage, the famous tragedian in Lord Chamberlain's Men. So Richard Burbage, who knew Shakespeare very well, might have drawn this one in 1600 or 1610. We don't know the year. Because look at this Chandos portrait. The Chandos portrait, it's like the person looks like a French guy, and there is a lipstick on his lips, and there is a ring in his ear, and the cloth is very black. And there is a theory that Shakespeare might have sat for this painting after playing a role. because as a player, they wore makeup. So this could be makeup after playing a role. And regarding his black cloth shirt or whatever it is very costly. At that time, black dye is not cheap, very costly. Only rich people like Shakespeare or playwrights, they might uh, have the money, enough money to buy a black dress. And this portrait was there in the family called Chandos, but the Chandos family fell into ruins, and around 1850s, they sold their property and everything, and this portrait was found and it was donated to National Portrait Gallery. Okay, then let's focus on first folio. The commendatory verses, kind of elegies. So one of the elegies was written by Ben Jonson. This is a full title, To the Memory of My Beloved Master, William Shakespeare, and What He Hath Left Us. So in which he calls Shakespeare, he was not of an age, but for all time. And in which he also said, small Latin and less Greek. You have to understand, Ben Jonson, a close friend of Shakespeare, is not criticizing Shakespeare. He is actually praising Shakespeare. People misunderstand and misteach this line, small Latin and less Greek. Ben Jonson says, Shakespeare knew small Latin and less Greek, yet Shakespeare achieved what he wanted in London. So it's a positive statement by Ben Jonson. In the same elegy, 1623, written by Ben Jonson, there is a reference to Christopher Marlowe. Anyone remembers the reference where he talks about Christopher Marlowe's strength, talking about blank words? What is that line or the phrase used by Ben Jonson, talking about blank words, which he calls what line? Is mighty line, Marlowe's mighty line. It is also there. Then you have to understand, not just Ben Jonson, there are also other poems written on Shakespeare. So you have Ben Jonson's, then Hugh Holland, Holland, Hugh Holland's poem on Shakespeare. Then Leonard Digges, Digges, Leonard Digges. Then we have another mysterious person, capital IM. Like WH, we don't know the identity of this person who wrote an elegy on or commendatory words on Shakespeare. We don't know this identity, but there are a lot of theories about this one. Then let's focus on the second folio published in 1632. Here we have Milton coming up with an elegy for Shakespeare, 16-line elegy. This is the original title, an epitaph on the admirable dramatic poet W. Shakespeare. But it was reduced to this title, On Shakespeare. So this is considered Milton's first published poem. He wrote it in 1630. Then it was published in 1632 in the second folio, where he praises Shakespeare. Dear son of memory, you don't need any monument. Why? The first folio or the folio itself is a monument, which will live forever and tell your name. So that is a praise by Milton. Then let's focus on the other folios. We have two more folios. The third folio is very important. Number one, it was published in 1663, the first printing. Maybe the third folio was sold out, the first printing. Then they went for the second printing of the third folio in 1664. So you should be very careful. First folio, 1623, second folio, 1632, third folio, first printing, 1663, and second printing, 1664. And this 1664 folio is very important, where for the first time Pericles was included. Not only Pericles, and 6 apocryphal plays. What are apocryphal plays? APOCRYPHAL, plays attributed to a playwright. We doubt whether this was really written. We simply put, we doubt the authorship of plays. Authorship of works, we call it apocryphal. So these are the 6 plays attributed to Shakespeare, but we doubt the authorship. So we have The London Prodigal, Thomas Lord Cromwell, Sir John Oldcastle, The Puritan Widow, a Yorkshire Tragedy, Locrine. Then the last folio, the fourth folio was published in 1685. And these are his lost plays, L-O-S-T. We have Cardenio, very famous play, C-A-R-D-E-N-I-O. We do not have the manuscript of this play. And also Love's Labours 1, because we have a play called Love's Labours Lost. Definitely there should be something called Love's Labours 1. But we do not have the manuscripts of this plays. There are some references to this plays. Shakespeare might have written these plays. But we have a playwright called Louis Theobald, who claims that he saw the manuscript of Cardenio and he came up with a play. Louis Theobald came up with a play called Double Falsehood or The Distressed Lovers. He claimed this play is based on the story of Cardenio, written by Shakespeare and John Fletcher. And Cardenio, there is a clue if you want to know the story. It is based on a famous novelist of the 17th century, Spain, who wrote Don Quixote. So in Don Quixote or Don Quixote, there is a novel within a novel. That story is similar to Cardenio. That's the theory. Shakespeare might have read the translation of Don Quixote, and that play within a play inspired him, so he came up with Cardenio. That's another theory. So we have Cervantes. Yes, Cervantes wrote Don Quixote on Quixote is fine. Next one. I'm not going into the other editions, but this guy should be mentioned, Nicholas Rowe. We have already looked at Nicholas Rowe's famous biography of Shakespeare, in which he claimed Shakespeare was a deer poacher. But his edition, 1709 edition, is very important, which is considered the first modern edition of Shakespeare's plays or the first illustrated edition in 6 volumes. Why this is important? Because he revised the spellings. He included exit and entrance, dramatic personae. He divided some of the plays into acts and scenes, and came up with a lot of illustrations for each and every play. So that's why Nicholas Rowe is very important. Then there are a lot of editions, one by Pope. Alexander Pope came up with the edition of Shakespeare's works. Then Theobald came up with editions. Then Johnson, Dr. Johnson came up with Shakespeare's edition, for which he also wrote a preface. Okay, with this, let's go to quarto. What is a quarto? Quarto, in comparison with the folio, is not a prestigious edition. The paper quality is poor, like a cow dung paper, very poor in quality, not a prestigious one, small in size. A printer's sheet is folded twice, so we get 4 leaves or 8 pages. And the first quartos, there are many quartos. Most of the quartos, or the first quartos, were published in 1594. Let's look at some of them. And here is a scholar called Alfred Pollard, P-O-L-L-A-R-D. He came up with a work called Shakespeare's Folios and Quartos. So he divided quartos into 2. Good quartos, bad quartos. What are good quartos? These publications are based on authoritative manuscripts. So they are reliable ones. But there are bad quartos. Bad quartos in the sense, plays not based on authoritative manuscripts, but based on actors' memory. But there are a lot of slippages, a lot of errors in them. So they are called bad quartos. And look at some of them. Good quarto editions, we have Titus Andronicus, published in 1594. As I told you before, people believe this Senecan tragedy, bloody or revenge tragedy, Titus Andronicus, could be Shakespeare's first play. That's a theory, and there are a lot of other plays here. But look at them, Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet, they are also published as bad quartos editions. And there are also other plays. Then we have bad quarto, as I told you before, Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet is there. Sometimes people believe Hamlet was published for the first time in 1603, right? And let's go to Shakespeare's plays. So actually this is how, now actually we are entering into Shakespeare's plays. So pay attention and you could get some of the questions from these sections. So we'll go one by one. We'll start with the Shakespearean comedies. What is a comedy? Generally something to do with love triangles or a problem to get married, romantic twist, and end. All the things end in all is well that ends well. That is the ending, right? Kind of a happy ending. So that is a comedy. If you have a tragic ending, that is a tragedy. So as comedies are divided into early comedies. So early comedies, there are 5 plays: The Comedy of Errors, The Taming of the Shrew, Love's Labour's Lost, A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Two Gentlemen of Verona. So these 5 plays generally, Midsummer Night's Dream is added here, added to this list, early comedies. So these are the 5 plays that come under early comedies. Let's look at some of the things concerning these plays. The Comedy of Errors is the shortest play by Shakespeare. Anyone, what is the longest play by Shakespeare? In which a madman or who pretends to be mad and tries to take revenge. So that play is considered the longest play by Shakespeare, Hamlet. Hamlet is the longest play, and this play, The Comedy of Errors, is considered the shortest play by Shakespeare. But this is very tedious to read or watch this play because the premise is very simple, based on mistaken identity. That creates a humor in this play. So we have brothers who are twins and their servants who are also twins. So we have a brother comes to visit another brother, and there is a mistaken identity. This brother has a wife. This wife mistakes this for her husband. So that creates the comedy. Same way. So we have the protagonist Antipholus, Antipholus, brothers. One from this place called Ephesus, Ephesus, another from Syracuse, Syracuse. Similar way, they have servants who are also twins, Dromio, Dromio. The thing is very tough. Who is who? Because they look similar, they look alike, their dress is similar. So it is tough to watch and tough to read who is actually who. So that is the problem of The Comedy of Errors. And comes The Taming of the Shrew. And this is considered a misogynistic play by feminists, because what is the play about? Here is a girl who says, I don't love you, when a guy says, I want to love you. We have Petruchio, Petruchio. Petruchio loves Katharina, but Katharina is not just an ordinary girl. She is the shrew, with animal spirit, wild woman, but she should be tamed by a man. So that is the title, The Taming of the Shrew. So Petruchio tortures her, doesn't give her food, makes her go hungry. Finally, she yields, and finally she falls in love, or supposedly falls in love with Petruchio. So that's why it's a misogynistic play. Anyway, you will get question, if at all, this is the question. This play starts with an induction, induction. What is an induction? Induction is a kind of a short scene or a kind of an introduction to a play. But what is shown in the introduction has nothing to do with the play. It is a short entertainment, generally with 2 or 3 scenes or 1 scene. So in this induction, we have a character called Christopher Sly, a drunken tinker. What happens? There is a duke, and this Christopher Sly, he is very drunk. He falls asleep on the street. So the duke sees this Christopher Sly and takes him home and dresses him up in his clothes. So when Christopher Sly wakes up, everyone treats him as a duke. So that is the order given by the real duke. So the real duke is actually hiding himself and enjoying the show. So he has played a prank on Christopher Sly. Now Christopher Sly cannot imagine that he is actually treated like a royal. He is actually wearing royal's clothes, and he is given proper food, and everybody addresses him as a duke. And he can't imagine, okay, I must be a drunk. Why am I treated like this? It's a practical joke on Christopher Sly. So this could be, sometimes you have to go for this interesting details. So this is the one play of Shakespeare that comes with an induction. Then let's look at Love's Labour's Lost. Interesting story. So we have in France, there are a place called Nevera. We have a king called King Ferdinand. So King Ferdinand and his friends, Byron, Domain, and Longueville, Longuevill, they make a vow they should not get married at least for 3 years, and no women should enter their enter the palace. But comes the Princess of France with her friends, Rosalind, Catherine, and Maria. Then this happens. King falls in love with the princess, and Byron falls in with love with Rosalind, Domain with Catherine, Longueville with Maria. Now each one should hide their love from others, and they should meet their lovers, and that's how the comedy is created. There is a beautiful scene in which they meet in a garden. Already a pair is there, another pair comes, another pair comes. Each of them, I mean, they hide themselves there, and finally a revelation. Then, of course, somehow we come to the conclusion. There is a play within a play called Nine Worthies, performed by a lot of people. I'm just mentioning two here. One, Costard, the clown, major clown here. Then Holofernes, the schoolmaster. There are a lot of other people. And before the end of the play, we have an announcement that the King of France is dead. So they can't get married immediately. Princess of France with her friends, she has to go to France to attend the funeral and 1 year mourning. So after 1 year, they vow that they will come back and get married. And the pageants in Nine Worthies, they sing a song, Cuckoo, Cuckoo. So this could be a question. Which play of Shakespeare's ends with a cuckoo song? So this is the play. Love's Labour's Lost ends with a cuckoo song. Then we have one of the famous comedy, A Midsummer Night's Dream. There are a lot of stories, but let me sum up. So we have four Athenians. We have a pair, two pairs of lovers. So we have Hermia, who is in love with Lysander. Then Helena, who is in love with Demetrius, but Demetrius is in love with Hermia, kind of a thing. When they were denied, or Hermia was asked not to marry Lysander, they ran away to the forest, the woods. And Helena followed, and by Demetrius. We have four Athenians in the forest, pair of lovers. In the forest, there is a fairy world. We have King and Queen, Oberon and Titania. And they have a problem. Titania has an Indian boy, a slave. Oberon asks for the slave, and Titania says no. So this creates a problem. So he asks Puck. Anyone? Puck is also called, I mean, one of the famous humorous character, clown or a fool in Shakespeare's play, Puck. So Puck creates all the magic, right? Puck is also called Robin. Anyone can finish it off? Robin Goodfellow. So Puck is also called Robin Goodfellow. So Robin Goodfellow uses a magic potion. He applies on Titania and also on Nick Bottom. So this is one story. There is another story. So we have some mechanicals, ordinary workers coming to the forest to practice the play that they are going to put before the king and the queen. So this is the name of the play within a play called Pyramus and Thisbe. So we have the famous character Nick Bottom, who is actually turned into a donkey, or donkey's head, who falls in love with Titania. So it's a kind of a revenge, Oberon's revenge on Titania. Then another, the base one. So we have a king Theseus and Amazon queen Hippolyta. They are going to get married. And for their marriage, these mechanicals are going to put on a play called Pyramus and Thisbe. So towards the end, after all the problems, so we have the weddings. So we have Theseus getting married to Hippolyta, then Hermia getting married to Lysander, and Helena getting married to Demetrius. And this is one of the often quoted line. Theseus says, the king says, the lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact, because they're all mad and they think alike. Then let's go for another category under comedy. We have romantic comedies. Romantic comedies are mature comedies of Shakespeare. Shakespeare at its peak And these are very mature comedies. We have 4 plays under romantic comedies: The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, Twelfth Night, Much Ado About Nothing. Let's look at some of them. Of course, when we think of a Merchant of Venice, of course, the title character, we have Antonio, a rich fellow, a merchant, but his goods or ship is in the sea and he doesn't have enough money to help his friend Bassanio, because Bassanio wants to attend what kind of competition to get Portia. So Bassanio needs money. Antonio doesn't have money. So they borrow money from Shylock the Jew. And of course, Bassanio goes to that place. He chooses the right casket and get the lady, Portia. But in the meantime, Shylock, he has that bond asking for a pound of flesh. And final scene, everybody knows the very famous court scene where Portia comes as a lawyer and argues for or pleads for mercy, and finally Antonio is saved, because in the bond there is no mention of blood. And but Shylock could be a different one, because he says, if you prick us, do we not bleed? Very famous speech by Shylock, because there's also the kind of anti-Semitism, prejudice against Jews. There are a lot of Jews in literature. One of the misportrayal famous character, Shylock. But there's a novel called My Name is Shylock. Shylock is my name. Find out who wrote that novel. A contemporary British novelist who is also a Jew. Shylock is my name. That's the name of a novel from the perspective of Shylock and others. The interesting one, who also for his another work he also won is Howard Jacobson. Howard Jacobson wrote that one. Next, we have As You Like It. This is the often asked question for, regarding this play. Which play is set in Forest of Arden? So Arden, As You Like It. So all starts with A, A-R and A-S. So just remember that As You Like It is set in Forest of Arden. I'm not going into this play. Maybe you can read it later. But some of the famous lines here, we have Amiens, which also starts in A. His song, Under the Greenwood Tree, Who Loves to Lie With Me. So there is a late Victorian novelist. This novelist took the title from here, Under the Greenwood Tree, known for his Thomas Hardy for Wessex, right? Under the Greenwood Tree, the title is taken from here. Then Jack, this is often prescribed, right, as a poem. We might have, or you might have read it in your school days. Jack's speech. All the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And the speech goes on and on. It's like listening to Rajini's song in Basha. Now, all the world is a stage. Then comes Twelfth Night. Twelfth Night is also called What You Will. Whenever there is a question from Twelfth Night, this is the often asked question when it comes to competitive exams. Which play of Shakespeare's begins with this opening line? If music be the food of love, play on. So it is said by Orsino. This is the opening line of Twelfth Night. Remember that? Maybe you can remember. Maybe Twelfth Night, a very famous function there. I mean, event. Maybe during the night, lovers are playing music or they're meeting on. If music be the food of love, play on. Then the Melgalio's favorite words. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. There's some truth to it, right? Next, there is another category under comedy is called city comedy. I hope you remember some of the city comedies we saw yesterday by Thomas Dekker. Thomas Dekker, D-E-K-K-E-R, I guess. Thomas Dekker with, I think, Webster, is known for city comedies. What is a city comedy? Now, city comedy is more to do with a kind of pretend. I mean, a person who tries to woo a rich lady, a mistress, with his wealth and other things. And there are a lot of jealousy around. Mostly happens in a particular town. right? So this is the only city comedy by William Shakespeare, The Merry Wives of Windsor. And this is also interesting. We have one of the most famous clowns of Shakespeare in this play. Anyone? John, can you complete it? Who is considered the most famous clown of all time, especially Shakespeare's clowns? John Falstaff. So John Falstaff visits a town called Windsor. So in this town, we have two merry wives, Mistress Ford and Mistress Page. They are married, and John Falstaff thinks he could woo Mistress Ford. So he pretends to be a rich man, but he is actually broke. He doesn't have enough money. And that creates the comedy. And Mr. Ford's husband is very jealous. So he wants to take revenge on Falstaff. So that is how it goes. Sometimes you will get a direct question. The title character, who are the title characters of this play? The merry wives, Mistress Ford and Mistress Page. Then let's go to another category, another classification of Shakespeare's comedies, problem plays. Problem plays are also called dark comedies. By the way, the term dark comedy is a coinage. It was coined by, I couldn't recall the name. Maybe when you get time, find out who coined the term dark comedy in J.A. Cutton's dictionary. Okay. So I'm talking about dark comedy. Please understand, I'm talking about the term dark comedy. I'm not talking about the term problem play. The term problem play was coined by F.S. Bose, B-O-A-S, fine. But the term dark comedy is different, right? So dark comedy is different because we don't know whether it is a tragic or comedy. That kind of a problem is also there. That's why it's called dark comedy. Also problem play. So the term problem play was coined by F.S. Bose in his famous work, Shakespeare and His Predecessors. So in which F.S. Bose said these three plays, All is Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Troilus and Cressida. These three plays are problem plays of Shakespeare. Why it is a problem? These plays deal with sexual jealousy and a lot of treachery, scheming, all the things are there. There is no morality there. So All is Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Troilus and Cressida. And F.S. Bose says Hamlet. Hamlet, the tragedy. Hamlet is a tragedy. These are comedies. All is Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Troilus and Cressida. And these plays are problem plays. And he later added Hamlet to this list. So when we say problem plays, we have four. All is Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, and Hamlet. But initially he went for only comedies, three comedies. Okay. Then let's look at some of the plays. No, it's not Andre Breton. Please find out who coined a dark comedy later. That the detail is available in J.A. Cutton because I read yesterday, I forgot. Okay, coming back to Measure for Measure, Pali ki Pali, no, tit for tat. That's the name of the meaning of the title, Measure for Measure. So we have a duke called Vincentio. Now he pretends to be going on a journey. So he leaves the place, Vienna, to be ruled by his deputy, Angelo. Now Angelo comes to power, but Angelo wants to impose or strictly follow the ancient rule of Vienna. What is that rule? If someone transgresses the law, especially laws regarding sexual morality, that person should be punished. The transgressor should be punished. And he is imposing this law very strictly. And these things are noted by Vincentio's favorite friend, Aeschylus. He's a lord. He's actually taking note of all these things in his absence. And during that time, a guy gets caught, Claudio, a young guy who is betrothed, who is engaged to Juliet. But before their marriage, Claudio impregnated Julia. Now Julia is pregnant. So because of this violation of the law, he should be punished. So Angelo says Claudio should be executed. So he should be punished for this transgression. And this news reaches Isabella. Isabella, Claudio's sister, who wants to be a nun. who is in a convent now, who wants to be a nun. There is a comic character called Lucio, and Lucio somehow gets this news to Isabella. Now Isabella runs to Angelo and pleads with Angelo, please spare the life of my brother Claudio. Now we come to know the true face of Angelo. Angelo seems to be a strict moralist, but we come to know Angelo says, okay, I will spare the life of your brother, but in order to do that, you have to sleep with me. So that is the condition by Angelo. Now Isabella is shocked. How could a ruler ask such a question? So Isabella goes back to the prison and she asks Claudio, see brother, so this is the condition. So I can't go with that. Claudio initially says, how dare that person ask such a thing? Then Claudio is afraid that he is going to die. Then he asks, Isabella, why don't you sleep with Angelo so that my life can be saved? See, these are the moral problems, sexual jealousy and a lot of other things. There is also something called a bed trick in this situation, because Vincentio the Duke is in disguise in the same city. He listens to the conversation. He says to Isabella, Isabella, you agree to that condition, but you should go to bed at night. So Angelo comes to that place at night. Instead of Isabella, Mariana goes to the bed. It is called a bed trick. So now Angelo is tricked to sleep with Mariana. Mariana was earlier engaged to Angelo, but she couldn't pay the money, dowry. So he broke the engagement. So now Mariana sleeps with Angelo. Now this is the measure for measure, right? Tit for tat. So that is the title. So finally, Angelo is a sinner. Now the Duke comes back. Everyone should be punished or judged. Now Claudio is released. Claudio can marry Juliet now. And Angelo is punished. Angelo should marry Mariana. Then finally, the twist. Vincentio proposes to Mariana. That is the irony. He knows that, Vincentio proposes to Isabella. Isabella wants to be a nun. Now, the Duke himself proposes to Isabella. It's an open ending. The play is an open ending. It has an open ending. We don't know what will happen next. So that's why it's a problem play. Thanks, Hemanandi. J.L. Stein, S-T-Y-A-N, who coined the term dark comedy. Okay. Next, let's go for Shakespearean romances, also called lost plays, L-A-S-T, or late plays. So towards the fag end of Shakespeare's career, he came up with romances. In the sense, 4 tragic comedies. The tragic comedies are called romances. 4 tragic comedies. We have Pericles. We know Pericles was not included in the first folio. And Cymbeline. Cymbeline in the first folio is actually categorized under tragedy, a tragedy of Cymbeline. And regarding Cymbeline, Cymbeline is a favorite of Lord Tennyson's. Lord Tennyson, during, when he was about to die, in his deathbed, he read Cymbeline, and he was very fond of Cymbeline. So he was buried with a copy of Cymbeline. So that's why Cymbeline is very famous because of this association and also of its own. Then the Winter's Tale and the Tempest. These 4 plays are called, or these 4 tragic comedies are called romances. Pericles, Cymbeline, the Winter's Tale, and Tempest. Sometimes that play, the 2 Noble Kingsmen, in collaboration with John Fletcher, also categorized under or brought under romances. Let's look at some of them. Of course, if you want to understand what is a romance, think of the Tempest. In most of the romances, you have family members are separated, lost, and towards the end of the play, they get united. If there is an enmity and the enmity is gone, now they are reunited, they are going to live together. That kind of scene. And most of the romances are set in exotic locales, some island, or people are in exile, that kind of thing. Then the scenes are in episodes, one episode after the other. Think of The Tempest. There's a scene, opening scene between Prospero and Miranda. There's a kind of a tempest, then Ariel, then Caliban, then Stefano and Trinculo, the comedians, then Ferdinand. There are a lot of scenes after scenes, episodic. And finally, reward and punishment. So Ariel is given the reward. So Ariel will be released by Prospero, but Caliban has to stay there. So think of Tempest so that you can know the features of romance. And these are some of the famous lines in Tempest, the Tempest. Caliban, whose name is an anagram of cannibal. Cannibal, Caliban. And who is the mother of Caliban? Anyone? Who was the original owner of this island? Then Prospero came here and chased her away, and he ruled this as a Sycorax. So Sycorax is the mother of Caliban. And Caliban's famous dialogue, "You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse." A favorite play when it comes to post-colonialism. So most of the post-colonial reading is based on Caliban as a rebel. Then another slave, Ariel, and his famous song, "Full fathom fie, thy father lies," when he is actually spying on Ferdinand. So he's actually talking about Ferdinand and Ferdinand's father here. Then Miranda and her famous line, "Oh, brave new world that has such people in it." There's also a novel called Brave New World, kind of a dystopian or futuristic novel written by, any guesses? Very famous one is Aldous Huxley. Then this Tempest sometimes is considered the last, L-A-S-T, last play by Shakespeare, because this play ends with the epilogue by Prospero. People think Prospero is Shakespeare giving his farewell speech. Then there is a novel called Indigo, I-N-D, Indigo by Marina Warner, which is a retelling of The Tempest. Now let's go to Shakespearean tragedies. There are a lot of categories, but when we say tragedies, there are 11 plays in the first folio. In 1623 edition, first folio, we have 11 plays, 11 tragedies. So of the 11, we have Roman plays, 4 Roman plays, then 4 major tragedies. Then we have Romeo and Juliet, Timon of Athens, and the 11th one, Cymbeline. Actually, Cymbeline in the first folio is considered a tragedy, but now we take Cymbeline to romance. So we can say 10 major tragedies or 10 tragedies. So first, let's look at Roman tragedies or Roman plays. Shakespeare's Roman plays are also history plays, right? Based on Roman history, but Roman history plays, but more tragic. So they are brought under tragedies. So Shakespeare relied on the translation of Plutarch's parallel lives for these plays. So we have 4 plays: Titus Andronicus, a bloody play, a Senecan tragedy, which sometimes is considered Shakespeare's first play. Then we have Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, and Coriolanus. So think of Julius Caesar. Of course, the soothsayer says, "Beware the Ides of March." The Ides of March means which date? Anyone? Ides means a particular date on which he would be killed, right? Assassinated. Yes, 15th of March, Ides of March. And Caesar doesn't listen to this warning. So he says, "Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once." But ultimately he was killed. And we know the famous speeches by Antony and Brutus. And Antony's favorite one, "This was the most unkindest cut of all." And he wins the politics, and Brutus dies and Brutus falls. And there is an anachronism. There is an anachronism in this play. What is an anachronism? Out of time. If you use something that belongs to a particular period, and if you situate it in some other time, that is called anachronism, out of time. So during the Roman period, there was no such thing called the clock. But Shakespeare uses clock in Julius Caesar. Brutus says, "Count the clock." And another conspirator, Cassius, says, "The clock has stricken 3. But there was no clock at the time. The same anachronism you can see in Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, where there is a mention of billiards but the game was not at all invented at that time. So simply put, anachronism is something, you place something in the wrong historical time. And talking about Antony and Cleopatra, we have this character Enobarbus, a friend of Antony, describing Cleopatra for the first time. The barge, I mean the boat or whatever it is, the barge she sat in like a burnished throne, burned on the water. So that is the first impression. For the first time, we have the queen of Egypt coming, and Antony sees her for the first time. The barge she sat in like a burnished throne, burned on the water. And these lines are used by another famous modernist poet in his 1922 poem. Almost similar lines as a kind of an allusion. Is T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. You can find these lines, a kind of alternated one. Then let's go for Coriolanus. Coriolanus is considered a political storehouse. It's a political play where Coriolanus fights for his people, but these people betrayed him because they didn't vote him to power. So Coriolanus goes with the enemy and tries to betray the country. Finally, his mother and wife, they plead with him. There's a change of heart, but too late, he was killed. But anyway, before he leaves his own people, he said, there is a world elsewhere. Beautiful line. There is always a world elsewhere, because the world we live in is very narrow. There is also a world elsewhere. Go and explore the world. So next, when we say major tragedies, we have 4: Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. So Hamlet, words, words, words. All these are some of the famous lines by Hamlet. Words, words, words. And this is my favorite line. That one may smile and be a villain. A very favorite line, because he is talking about King Claudius. King Claudius smiles to his face, but Hamlet knows that he is a villain. Then the famous soliloquy, to be or not to be, that is the question. Then kind of a fate. Hamlet says, there is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. Even in the fall of a sparrow, there is a divine design. How about me? So that kind of a thing. How many soliloquies are there in Hamlet? Anyone? But anyway, there are, when it comes to Shakespearean criticism, there are a lot of interesting works. Here is a famous work, The Wheel of Fire, interpretation of Shakespearean tragedy by Wilson Knight. Remember this text? This could be a question. Yes, seven soliloquies by Shakespeare. Check it out. Okay, next we have Othello, based on the kerchief, the handkerchief tragedy, right? So we have this villain, Iago, who says, but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve. He says, I'm going to pretend I'm going to, stab Othello in his back. So that's how he takes his revenge. He is very jealous of the rise of Othello and his marrying Desdemona. But somehow, with the help of his wife, Emilia, Iago plants seeds of doubt in Othello's mind, and Othello, without listening to her story of Desdemona, he smothers her to death. And before her death, Desdemona sings a song. It's called a willow song. Sing willow, willow, willow. Right? So remember, cuckoo song. What comes to your mind? Cuckoo song. You remember? You think of a play. Which play ends with cuckoo song? Then similar way, when we think of songs in Shakespeare, we have another song called Willow Song by Desdemona, kind of a sad song. And people always want to know the reason behind Iago's treachery. There are a lot of theories, but Coleridge says there is nothing at all. Sometimes the people are like that. That's his nature. So Coleridge says, searching for the motive behind Iago's betrayal is like the motive hunting of motiveless malignity. There's nothing at all. Okay. Then the next, and which is considered the masterpiece, King Lear. Of the 4 tragedies, King Lear is considered his masterpiece. And there is a play called Lear by Edward Bond, because Edward Bond has already written a play called Bingo. And this is another play based on King Lear. Anyway, let's look at some of them. King Lear, when he goes mad, when he goes hysteric, he uses this technical medical term, hysterica passio, Hysterica passio, which is something with hysteria, kind of a mental disease, especially with women at that time. And this is a famous words. I am a man more sinned against than sinning. So, of course, what is the problem? He should divide the kingdom between or among three daughters, but he committed a sin. But he says, I am a man more sinned against than sinning. And there is also another character by Thomas Hardy, who also, there is a description of that character, who is more sinned against than sinning. Because that Thomas Hardy's character falls in love with a character called Angel, but she is forced to live with Alec, the villain. Finally, she kills Alec, and for that murder, she was hanged to death. And towards the end of the novel, the angel, husband of Tess, marries Tess's sister, Tess of the Tuberville's. So sometimes that could be a question. Two major characters, I think it was a question before. Who are the two major characters who claim or described as more sinned against than sinning? One is King Lear, another is Tess of Tuberville's. And another famous lines from King Lear by Gloucester, Gloustr. Gloucester says, as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. See, imagine these naughty boys who catch flies and play with them and kill them ultimately. Similar way, we are flies in the hands of gods. They play with us and finally kill us for their enjoyment. Then the Scottish play, Macbeth. Macbeth is generally addressed as the Scottish play or the Bard's play. Why? Whenever they perform this play, there is a tragedy. Either the set catches fire, some player dies on the spot or gets injured. So whenever they put on this play, they call it the Scottish play. They don't call it Macbeth. But anyway, let's look at some of the famous lines. The three witches say, fair is foul and foul is fair. Anyone knows the head of these witches? These three witches has a head, starting with the letter H-E. Is Hecate, H-E-C-A-T, Hecate. Then the famous soliloquy by Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Then the same soliloquy we have, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. There is a novel called Sound and Fury by an American novelist known for Stream of Consciousness. Anyone? Sound and Fury. The title is taken from his speech, soliloquy, Macbeth, is William Faulkner. Then we have another tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. It has nothing to do with the famous tragedies. Romeo and Juliet, they are called star-crossed lovers. They are doomed from the beginning. It's a family fight, like two families, warring families, and between them are caught these young lovers. But anyway, the famous balcony scene is often remembered. And Juliet's famous words, what is in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. A rose is a rose, right? It will smell whatever name you use. And the famous balcony scene where when Romeo has to leave, Juliet says, parting is such sweet sorrow. And you can easily tell me the figure of speech used in this line, parting is such sweet sorrow. Two contrasting words coming are placed side by side here. Then we are coming to Shakespearean histories. Shakespearean histories, I would say 10 totally. Totally 10, but let's leave out Roman tragedies. Roman plays, they are also history plays based on Roman history, but generally we discuss Roman plays under tragedies. So let's focus on plays based on English history plays. We have King John, then first tetralogy, collection of 4 plays, then second tetralogy, then All is True. I hope you remember All is True, because that is where associated with the destruction of Globe Theatre, also called Henry VIII. Let's look at the classification. What is first tetralogy? The four plays: Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3, then Richard III. These four plays are called first tetralogy. How should remember these things? Say, remember Richard III. 3 plus 3 is 6, right? So that's how you can remember this. Richard III, Henry VI, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. And some of the famous lines: I am determined to prove a villain. Famous line by Richard III, the villain. Then second tetralogy, also called Henriette. The term is coined by Alvin Kernan, the researcher. So second tetralogy, we have the classification: Richard II, 2 plus 2, 4, right? So we have Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, then finally Henry V. So let's go to the next section, fools and clowns. So bear with me for next 10 minutes. I have to finish up the class. We are coming to towards the end of this class. So the difference between fools and clowns: fools, their comic effects are intentional. Clowns, accidental. Fools are very witty for their dialogue. Clowns, they are a kind of a slapstick comedy. And fools, they are integral part of the play, participants, where clowns, they come kind of a comic track. Fools, for example, Falstaff comes in Henry IV. Launce, L-A-U-N-C, is a clown who comes in Two Gentlemen of Verona. Let's look at some of the clowns or the fool who is witty. Sir John Falstaff. He comes in Henry IV Part 1 as a drinking companion to Prince Hall. Again in Henry IV Part 2, but this time denounced by Prince Hall, who has become Henry V. Then his death is announced in Henry V. He doesn't come in this play, but his death is announced by Mistress Quickly in Henry V. Then at the request of Queen Elizabeth I, Shakespeare brought back Sir John Falstaff in The Merry Wives of Windsor. And this is how he describes himself: I am not only witty in myself, but the cause that wit is in the other men, by John Falstaff. Some of the other fools: in Twelfth Night, we have Fest, F-E-S-T, because Twelfth Night is a festival. So you can remember Fest. And his favorite dialogue: better a witty fool than a foolish wit. Then Midsummer Night's Dream, we have Puck or Robin Goodfellow. Then As You Like It, you have Touchstone, who also has similar line: the fool doth think that he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Then the use of clown in tragedies. In tragedies, we use clowns for comic relief. Why we go for comic relief? First, imagine the movie. I mean, you might have watched this movie called Vidudalai, the recent movie by Vetrimaran. You know, it's very dense, very political. So, so we need some relief. That's how we have this love story. So we have a love story between Suri and that girl there. And with Ilayaraja's song, there is a kind of a relief. Then we go to the politics. So similar way, tragedies, major tragedies, they are very dense, especially Hamlet. So we need some relief. So we use clowns. We have grave diggers. The grave diggers acts as clowns are for comic relief. Then some of the famous clowns, we have Love's Labour's Lost. I hope you remember Costed. Then in Winter's Tale, we have Autolycus, and in Merchant of Venice, we have Lancelot Gobbo. And as I told you before, William Kemp is a famous comedian associated with the Lord Chamberlain's men, and he played major comic roles like Dogberry in Much Ado About Nothing, Falstaff in Henry IV, Nick Bottom in Midsummer's Night's Dream. Then this is the last section of today's class: Shakespearean women. Of course, when you think of Shakespearean women, more than men, women play major roles in Shakespearean plays. We have Cleopatra. So look at her death. She is majestic throughout the play. As a queen, she held Antony in sway throughout the play. And even in her death, she should be majestic, because she knows after the defeat of Antony, Octavius Caesar will drag Cleopatra to Rome, and in the streets of Rome, she will be, shamed, no, should be put to shame. She doesn't want that end. So she kills herself by applying the snake asp to her breast and her thigh, and she dies. So even in her death, she is majestic. Then the brave lady, Lady Macbeth, when the husband is very hesitant to commit the deed, she does that. I have done the deed, she declares. She commits a murder. Or she encourages the king, Macbeth, to her husband to kill the king. And her favorite, her trouble, or what we call the objective correlative. Who coined the term objective correlative? Because this is one of the objective correlative. Through these objects or dialogue, we understand this. She is psychologically disturbed. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Because psychologically, of course, she has washed her hands of blood, but still she feels guilty. So it represents her guilt. Yes, T.S. Eliot. Then let's look at some of the fathers and daughters in Shakespeare's plays. Most of the daughters in Shakespeare's plays are motherless. They do not have mothers. For example, Ophelia doesn't have a mother. And her father, Polonius, is a political advisor. He says brevity is the soul of wit, but ironically, he is not brief at all. And because of this fellow, Polonius, Ophelia has to return the love letters written to her by Hamlet. So she returns all the love letters. And look at Ophelia. Ophelia is caught between men, the father figure, or the father, Polonius, and brother Laertes. They say you should not fall in love with Hamlet. And Hamlet, as a duty-bound son, he wants revenge, and he says, go away. So she goes mad, and the final scene where she distributes flowers, and she says, good night, ladies, good night, sweet ladies, good night, good night. And there are also other daughters who are also motherless, and the conflict between father and daughter. So we have Desdemona, who falls in love with this old man, Othello, and the dark man, after listening to his war adventures. But the father says, no, you should not get married to Othello. So the play opens with a court scene where the father, Brabantio, says, you should not marry to Othello, but they are already married. Then Desdemona says, no, I will be loyal to my husband. But that same husband, finally smothers her to death. Then we have another father-daughter conflict in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which also opens with a court case where the father, Egeus, E-G-E-U-S, approaches the king Theseus and says, sir, I want my daughter Hermia to marry Demetrius. But Hermia says, no, I love Lysander. So she goes against the father's will, and they run away to the forest, and finally she gets married to Lysander. So you see the conflict between father and daughter throughout Shakespeare's plays. Similar thing happens in Merchant of Venice, where Shylock has a daughter, Jessica. And Jessica, and both are Jews, but Jessica falls in love with a Christian. Shylock is against it, but Jessica runs away, elopes with that Christian. And Jessica's favorite, famous words, but love is blind and lovers cannot see. Similar thing happens in King Lear. Opening scene itself, the old man asks, how much do you love me? The three daughters. And the elders, the two daughters say, I love you to the skies and, all these things. But the favorite daughter, Kadakuti, Chalakuti, lost daughter, he expects something from her favorite daughter, his favorite daughter, Cordelia. But Cordelia says nothing. And this irritates this old man. The old man wants to leave a lot of things to this young lady, but she says nothing. So he gives her another chance. Nothing can come of nothing, speak again. But Cordelia says, I love your majesty according to my bond as a daughter, no more, no less. Now the kingdom is divided between two daughters and she is left out of inheritance, and that's the problem. Finally, she dies. And even Portia is motherless and also fatherless. But after his death, the father still has Portia in control. So if Portia wants the money, she has to go through the will of her father. The will says one who chooses the right casket will get the daughter. So of course, we have Bassanio coming to this town and choose the right box. There are 3 boxes. So you have gold, silver, and the last box, which is made of what? Any guesses? Yes, lead. So it is made of lead, and that is the box chosen by Bassanio. Then when we think of sons and mothers, we can think of Hamlet and Gertrude. Because Hamlet is very much in love with Gertrude, kind of an Oedipus complex, but he has to kill the father figure. The biological father is already dead, King Hamlet. Now, King Hamlet is replaced by another father figure, Claudius. So Claudius is the father. So according to this Oedipus complex, the father figure should be eliminated so that the son can get the full attention of the mother. So King Claudius is dead, and finally, of course, Gertrude is also dead. So he pretends to be mad. So he says, I must be cruel only to be kind. Then we have husbands and wives. There are a lot of husbands and wives. One of the famous one is Caesar's wife, Calpurnia. They do not have children, and Calpurnia warns Caesar, do not go to the capital today, 15th of March. There are a lot of omens. She says, when beggars die, there are no comets seen. So there are a lot of omens, so do not go to the capital. But Caesar doesn't listen to his wife's words, and he says, danger knows full well that Caesar is more dangerous than he. Kind of a Vadivel dialogue, and finally gets killed. And this is one of the famous features in Shakespeare's comedies, especially cross-dressing. Women, they disguise themselves as men and they act powerful. So example, we have Portia and Nerissa in Merchant of Venice coming as lawyers and saving men from death. Similar thing happens in Twelfth Night, Viola, As You Like It, Rosalind, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Julia, then Cymbeline, Imogen, Imogen. And with this, we finish today's class. Thank you so much for your patience. Tomorrow we will go for, what's for tomorrow? I think Milton. So before you come to this class, please go through a history of English literature so that you will find this easy. Because there are a lot of names, a lot of works, a lot of dialogues, a lot of things you have to remember. So if you read and come, you will definitely find it so easy. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.